Misha here. Did a video on the M17, M18. We know where that's all at with Sig Sauer right now. People don't like it, sure. So I thought we'll go more classic. Did a video on the Colt M45A1. Criticism there too. So is this what you want? Because when you insist on something just being as beefcake as possible, never gonna jam, never gonna break apart, this is what you get. Of course, I'm just joking around with you. And we've covered this in the past, but I'd like to think since then, at least my camera's better, and maybe I'm a little bit better too. So today, let's revisit and shoot the Heckler & Koch Crew Serve pistol, the SOCOM, the Mark 23 MK23 Mod 0 in 45 ACP. And one reason I haven't had this out a lot until this year, I haven't had a lot of extra 45, and what 45 I have around has kind of been defensive stuff like hollow point. But thanks to finding out that Phoenix makes a good 45 round, ball ammo, good for plinking and even target shooting, been able to put some more rounds through it. 1911s, and of course that M45A1. This is one of those pistols I've thought about selling several times, and I just never can because it's iconic, kind of in the wrong way, but it's also kind of right in the right way because, you know, this is exactly what the U.S. Special Forces requested, ordered. HK just delivered them. And it was designed concurrently with the USP, not exactly a derivative of it, vice versa, because they both came out in the early 90s. So before we dive in, you know the deal. Please like, share, subscribe. I'd like to help check out Patreon to support the channel. Mark 23, the Crew Served pistol with Phoenix 45 ACP. I don't recall the grain weight. I apologize. That isn't me failing. I never take much care for the very flat decocker on these. The double action trigger is not bad. But obviously, single is where it's at. This thing, well, it's gargantuan. The pistol itself is about 2.5 pounds. But the Mark 23 is really a whole assemblage with a laser aiming module, a LAM made by Insight, a suppressor made by Knights Armament. Once you throw the suppressor on, the overall length jumps to 16.5 inches. And the weight, if I had a LAM, would be 5 pounds for a pistol. But that's what they wanted. They wanted an offensive pistol because while in most military billets, it's a defensive weapon at best, for certain special forces, special operations needs, they may be only able to carry one gun, one pistol, and that might be their primary weapon, hence offensive. And this goes back to the late Cold War, 1989, when they were laying out specs. For one thing, they quickly decided they didn't want to go with 9mm, and they looked at 10 mil, but it really wasn't suitable for what they wanted. On the other hand, they still had 45 ACP knocking about, and they developed a new kind of 45 plus P round. And it would be good to use that in a handgun with a suppressor because at least 45 ACP is subsonic, so it very well suppresses. Now you might be thinking, why not just, redo the 1911? The Marines Army still had plenty. This is one that recently just came in the store. It's kind of a cool gun. It's original Colt parts rebuilt on a commercial frame. Let's see if it actually shoots. let's try out this Colt-ish gun. Phoenix 45 ammo. I'm also not sure about this mag, but we will find out. Got me in the head, but held open. Classic. Shot well, at least for the initial test with the Phoenix there. Why not use these? Well, a few reasons. For one, yeah, magazine capacity, 7 round standard. You can bump that out to 8, maybe even 10 with an extended mag. Expense, of course. The problem is the 1911 frame isn't going to handle that hot plus P round, not long term. And these don't suppress terribly well. At least that was the mindset. They don't have any kind of rail on the bottom. Basically, by the time they even tried to rework a 1911 to halfway meet what they wanted, it would have been cheaper just to, get a new gun. So, they announced trials. And really the two companies that played ball were Heckler & Koch, of course, and Colt. But you would think Colt would win. Alright, here at the table, why didn't Colt get picked? Well, they couldn't make the cut. And I don't really know how serious of a contender they were or the trials committee was. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Now, U.S. SOCOM, when they announced it as the OWHS program, Offensive Weapon Handgun System program, they had several companies interested in submitting proposals until they saw the requirements. Yeah, that's when it really just came down to Heckler & Koch and Colt. And it was not, from the very beginning, meant to be a pistol and then they're going to get a suppressor elsewhere. Nope, it was a system. Kind of not dissimilar to what we saw with the XM7 recently. They wanted a suppressor, they wanted a laser aiming module, and they wanted it to all be integrated, good to go. You can operate with or without the suppressor, what have you. Of course, the trials specified 45 ACP and had some pretty ridiculous endurance requirements. What Colt submitted was basically a version of the 1911 updated to meet the specs. Kind of part of the all-American derivation, although it was just called the Colt OWHS because it was made for that. And it did have a suppressor, it did have a laser module, but it was still connected to the John Browning. H&K, what they submitted for trials was very similar to this. Now, this was concurrent, as I said earlier, with the creation of the USP. And the USP was created, amongst other reasons, to fire hotter cartridges like 40 Smith & Wesson 10mm. So a 45 ACP, that's okay. And since it was a new design, they didn't have a lot of old baggage they had to deal with. It's no surprise that they really did clean up. But the testing, the trials would last multiple years, technically beginning towards the end of 1991 and still going on through 1995, at least the early part. Yeah, this was a shoe-in here. And let's try a full mag through the Colt-ish gun. Why not? Hey, it feels good. And held open. You can't say fairer than that. The gun was meant to be an offensive sidearm, handgun, for special forces, covert operations, close quarter battles. Basically, if they can only bring one gun in, this had to be it. So the reliability, the durability was crazy. Up to 30,000 rounds fired through a pistol without a major parts breakage. And the suppressor itself had to stay effective for at least 15,000 rounds. Of course, it would go through the same environmental testing you know and love today: mud, sand, salt water. Because one of the major interested parties and planned users was, of course, the Navy SEALs, also Marine Raiders Expeditionary Force, Delta II, Army less interested. I don't think anyone in the Air Force really cared. It needed to be accurate. That's part of the reason why we have such a long slide and relatively long barrel. It needed to deliver 2 MOA groups at 25 meters and do so consistently and repeatably, and do so with and without the suppressor attached. Thanks to having the ammo, I have been able to shoot it. But, well, this isn't a real Knight's suppressor. And unfortunately, it's mostly for display. Now let's try it with the faux suppressor. Not sure how well this is going to work. I know one way to find out. Yeah, that's kind of my experience doing this. You try really holding it tight. Yeah. It's too much weight without the back pressure. But hey, you get to see what's supposed to be a perfect pistol. Do that on camera. But it's not the gun's fault. To put it bluntly, the HK went the distance and the Colt just didn't. Not even close. And in fact, I believe at the time, early to mid-90s, the submission here set a kind of a record for just how many number of rounds it could be fired without a stoppage. They were very diligent about looking at not just failures, but what they were, stovepipes, double feeds, other kinds of jams, documenting them. They required at least, in between rounds fired with a failure of at least 2,000 rounds, so fire 2,000. This actually exceeded that. The Colt did not. But I think it really just benefited from the fact that it was an all-new design, and not at the time that I was armament suppressor was pretty advanced. Things age. The Insight Lamb that it would be packaged with, it was good for laser technology of that era. And of course, Germany would do something with the G36 and electronics in the same time period. So to no one's real shock, in 1995, the HK submittal was declared the winner and officially designated as the Mark 23 Mod 0, the offensive weapons system. And it was a complete system. They never, ordered the pistol, ordered the suppressor, ordered the laser module separately. This is how they were delivered. But this is only for special forces. And it was really the first time, and maybe only time in U.S. history, when such a offensive pistol was ever created and adopted. Even if it wasn't for general issue, how would it turn out? I mean, they put a lot of time into it, and HK built a gun to really last tens of thousands of rounds. Besides, let's finish off that mag. Definitely not the ammo, definitely not the pistol. The faux suppressor is just really good for display. So yeah, let's talk about military service. Let's also talk about how the civilian guns are different. And I'm going to give my shooting impressions throughout just to kind of keep this lively. The trials, the testing, the requirements really do start to let the pistol make more sense. In 1995, U.S. SOCOM ordered 1,950 packages. The pistols would be built in Oberndorf, Germany, and delivered. I don't know if anywhere were delivered in 95. It could have been. You definitely see some 96 dated ones. The earliest commercial ones were 97 dated, but pretty rare. We will get to the commercials. And this was the one big major order. However, there would be small follow-on orders for about the next 5, 6, even 7 years. Hard to say. And these would basically be attrition replacements, training, that kind of thing. You know, just keeping the inventory roughly 1,900, 2,000. Did it work? Who used it? Where did they use it? Well, first, let's get a little more up close and personal with the features. Double action, single action pistol with a manual single-sided decocker, although the safety is double. You can't push it up with the hammer forward. In there. Obviously, you can't decock it either. Only a single-sided release, but we do have the German-style paddle release, which, you know me, I really like these. And more Americans should get used to them because they're really good. As I mentioned, this is basically 5.9-inch barrel, cold hammer forged, chrome lined with polygonal rifling. It also has an O-ring up here. It's a replaceable part. You're meant to replace it every 5,000-6,000 rounds, but people have gone well over 10,000 with them. That just lets the barrel return to zero with the slide consistently. And that's because this is considered a match grade pistol, match grade barrel, and match grade trigger system. It is threaded 16mm, but right hand. A lot of your other German HK type guns from this time and more modern eras are 16mm, but they're a left hand, making it pretty unique. Our slide is a pretty big and bulky thing. Now this has the later hostile environment, essentially like a tinifer finish, but early on, for several years, it had just kind of a black oxide with phosphated, there we go, phosphated, I'm gonna leave that in, parts and things. We do have sights tall enough to work with the suppressor, of course. Squared off trigger guard, notice there's a hole in it. That's to work with the module. This might look like a Picatinny rail. It is not. No notches. It is a proprietary rail. Again, 95, 96, people weren't putting pick rails on pistols yet. So, you know, that's not really a negative. And disassembly, well, pretty straightforward too. Pretty standard kind of Browning style. We see this on CZ75s, high powers. Big old latch there. Remember, couldn't have a parts breakage. We have a polymer frame, which probably keeps this from being a 4-pound gun, but it has a good bit of metal reinforcement. Sorry if it's dirty. You know, we've been shooting it. Pretty standard controls there. Here's our slide. The recoil system in this is pretty neat. Big old spring there. And there's a double one. In it is an active recoil buffer. Besides, remember I said at the beginning, not just 45 ACP, but 45 plus P. Our barrel. When we take it out, we can feel a little bit of resistance from our O-ring. Got a bit of a feed ramp, but it's alright. Pretty beefy barrel. German steel slide. Little blocky, but you can understand how this would last and last. So in a lot of ways it looks like a conventional handgun, just everything's beefcake. Got a more through the SOCOM pistol. Single action trigger is not bad. Double though, for my hands it's a long way forward. But she is reliable, and I've always preferred the German style mag release. So that seems like it's a pretty good gun, and it is for being a match grade pistol and a target pistol. But the need it was kind of dreamt up for, did it really exist? The Navy SEALs were kind of always the first and primary target of this. That's why maritime use was important. Corrosion resistance. Again, the first pistols would have the original finish. 2000 or 2001, they would introduce this newer style. I don't believe any older pistols had got it though. Just, you know, what have you. The Marines, Expeditionary Force, Recon, I still call them the Raiders. They had some, maybe used them a bit, late 90s, early 2000s. Delta Force, maybe a few other Army bases, evaluated them. It's entirely possible they did use them. Keep on, this is Special Forces stuff, so a lot of it's classified or just kind of off the books, frankly, in the first place. Again, I've never seen any mention of Air Force doing anything with this gun. Not to say they didn't, but it seems like its primary use and role was like maritime insertions, covert type deals. If you needed to silence a guard, this would be good for it. Power, when accuracy was important, that kind of thing. How did it do? Mark 23 in the rain.
Beautiful.
Well, it held up. It worked. But my goodness, was it big and heavy. And technology is really progressing on. The war on terror kicks off, and it does see use in Afghanistan and even a decent amount in the earliest days of Iraq. But most of your operators are finding it's such a niche item that how often do you really need it? On top of that, the Knight's armament suppressor, while good technology for early to mid 90s, it's getting a little bit long in the tooth a decade later. Knight's does update it a little bit. Likewise, the Insight LAM, they made it as good as they could, but it did prove to be a little more fragile and a little bit bulkier compared with newer items. So Insight 2 would update it. I believe the designation was ANPEC 6. So you see a few revisions there. That's really about it that I can think of. The finish on the pistol, a couple of tweaks to the other modules. And that's a good thing. I mean, it shows that the design was pretty sturdy, pretty stable. But most units would just train with it, take it on a mission or two, and then it would just sit in U.S. SOCOM armories. The last follow-on order that I could really find that seems confirmed, and it was just a pretty small batch, was no later than 2002. So the orders 95 to 2002. How many were purchased in total? Under 2,500. Yeah, not that big of a deal. Already by 2005, newer pistols or at least ones like, for example, the Glock 19 is finally getting it military acceptance. You'll get the Beretta M9A1, and even the Sig Sauer P226 is further updated and modernized, becoming the Mark 25. And HK themselves, they've got their updated USPs. You'll get the HK45, HK45C. All these newer designs are increasingly making this look like a dinosaur. So it gets taken out to play less and less, and by around 2010, give or take, these are practically never seen in the field. Fun fact though, the Mark 23 Mod O has actually never been officially retired. Even after, 2010, it was just essentially a training gun, a curiosity, a what the hell, why not type gun. And by 2020, in this decade, it's just there. I will say this though, if you gave me a choice between this and the M45A1, I'll take this. After all, the M45A1 with the rail, 1911s aren't exactly the lightest. So, and you do get at least 12 shots versus 7 or 8. And I do enjoy shooting it. It's got a lot to recommend it. What about on the civilian market? Mark 23. It still works in the rain. Shortly after the Mark 23 motto, that's how the military guns with US SOCOM and other government proofs would appear. In 1998, Heckler & Koch would first introduce the Mark MARK 23 pistol for the civilian market. And these early guns would be entirely made in Oberndorf, Germany, and they would have the original finish. Seems like maybe serials went up to around 5,000, and they too would get the updated finish. Now, to be fair, this one has the newer Tennifer finish type, and the last follow-on orders that the military got also had this finish. You see the same thing with the Bundeswehr's P8A1. It also got the updated, more corrosion-resistant finish, because again, these were maritime use, and if they're going to do it for one, do it for another. I should also mention that eventually, assemblage of the pistols would be done by HK USA here, although the parts, like on this one, are still made in Germany. They just are put together here. Should also mention the first generation of guns, because this was deep in the Clinton assault weapons ban, did not come with 12-round mags. They came with 10. For most guns, this would not be a big deal, but this is an HK. So if you wanted to find a 12-round mag, even after the ban lifted in September of 2004, you were still going to spend $100 to $200. During the ban, forget about it. If you found one, they would ask you, do you really love your firstborn? And the Knight's armament suppressors, again, fake one, but if you ever found a military one or similar, arm and a leg. The Insight laser module, I'm sure some have come onto the civilian market, and they too would be crazy expensive. Also, I'm not really sure from a practical standpoint why anyone would want, that era of technology. Oh well, it is what it is. They are cool because of what they are, and they certainly proved that HK could make a damn durable gun. They were also super expensive. Why do I even have this one? Why? It was on sale, baby. Yeah, I actually picked this up maybe 2012. It's a very late serial. Really, it seems like production ended or was severely curtailed after about 2010. In the highest known serial, like I said just a minute ago, up to about 5,000, they were just straight German imports. After that, they started to be assembled here from German parts. Mine has a serial in the 17-ish range. The highest known serials are in the 18 .4 range, so speculated around 18,500, maybe the highest serial number. The military guns had their own serial range. A friend of mine back in the day, hey Mike, had one of these, an earlier one, and he paid the asking price. And back then this was a very expensive pistol at a time when a lot of handguns were $300-$400. HK was getting over $2K. I wasn't about that. I'm sure his was probably an all-German gun, so that's cool. But his was also bought during the assault weapons ban. Not so cool, 10-round mag. No, I picked mine up when CDNN had them. They were a great source in the early teens or whatever of just a lot of new old stock stuff, or, you know, when they'd run out. I picked up a few Walthers. P99's cheap there. Peanut has now joined the chat. And for that, I'm not going to say exactly what I paid, but it was not a whole lot over $1,000. And mine actually came with not one, just the pouch I happen to use for this, but two factory 12-rounders, meaning I didn't have to spend that extra money. It also came with a thread protector, a couple of extra O-rings, HK box, and an old school manual. So for that, it was just so goofy and so reliable and fun. And they are very light recoiling thanks to the double spring system in here. And it really has grown to be a favorite of mine. But it's not perfect. And that's not even counting the size and weight. The double action trigger, it's intentionally heavy for safety, but it is ribbed. It does feel good. I do like that it is a metal trigger. And the single action, that's the stuff. It is a nice single action trigger. Not, not like a competition trigger, but it's military. But that's expected for very precise shots. You see me cocking the hammer. I like the hammer on this gun a lot, the way HK did it. It sticks out enough that it's easy to grasp, but it's bobbed enough that it's not going to catch. Notice too how it kind of, it actually has a safety there, meaning it only goes forward very much like that. And finally, it has a kind of rubberized, polymerized coating. It's a metal hammer, but I like the coating on it. It means in the heat, like we've been shooting recently, and the cold, not to mention in the wet, you're going to get a sure grip. In fact, the whole pistol, I like the texturing. The front strap and the back strap have relatively aggressive, but not terribly sharp. It's rounded points. The sides, a little more rough. The mag release, I've already said I like. It sticks out enough, but I don't think you're going to accidentally hit it. Shame that the side stop is not ambi, but the safety is. It's a little bit small, especially on this side, but that's not so bad. The decocker, I understand why it's so slim and it's metal. I think this could have actually benefited from a bit of a polymer coat too, because I find my finger likes to kind of slip off of it. But then again, this pistol was kind of designed for use in gloves. I think instead of a horizontal type serrations, more of a checkered finish would have been better. But at least it is low profile. You're not going to accidentally trip it, from what I can see, because you have to press it down so far. The accessory rail is neither here nor there, because back then they just didn't have a standard. And even though this gun was made in the 21st century, they did not change the design. And that's something I have to say. Some say that the military guns had the original finish, and only the commercial guns had the updated, what they consider HE, hazardous environment finish. No, as I said earlier, the last military guns shipped to the U.S. SOCOM had this finish. There were a few other military buyers outside of this that might have got them too. It was just the finish of the time. That said, yeah, if you were to look at the numbers, mostly it would be the civilian Mark 23s that have it, but I don't care because this is objectively a more corrosion and a more wear resistant finish. So can't really complain about that, right? And one more. This one did come with the 12 rounders too. Yeah, you can go pretty offensive, I'd say. That's what we got. The civilian gun is built with the same parts, has the same internals, that same beefy recoil system. It has the same match grade polygonal rifle barrel, same O-ring, return to zero. Some people used to say in the past that the civilian guns weren't built to the same accuracy standards of the military. I've never seen any concrete evidence of that. In fact, it would probably be more effort for HK not to build them with the same parts and quality as the military than, and for what they were charging, why would they? Obviously, this can fire plus P just fine. And I should say that the mags, they're very easy to load fully. Single feed, double stack, witness holes in the back, metal body, polymer base, and they do set upright just fine. Perfectly good mags. In the 1990s, 12 plus 1 of 45 was pretty good, but newer pistols have come out that have bumped that up to 13, 15, even greater. And you can get extended mags up to 20 rounds for these, although I don't think they're HK. And it is a comfortable gun. Downsides. Cost. Absolutely. Weight, size, can't argue with that. I would also ding it from a shooting point of view that it's kind of own more or less unique thread pitch. That's one reason I don't have a suppressor for it yet. If I get a suppressor for this, it'll probably only be for this gun. Although with recent legal changes, I'll probably get one now. Some Americans do not like the German-style paddle mag release. They are wrong. Sorry. The Browning style, you have to flip it around most of the time. There are some ambi Brownings, I know, but a lot of them, it's like, well, you can just reverse the mag catch. Yeah, but this one, you don't have to. And I like it because what if your dominant hand, right or left, is injured? What if it's holding something? This means you can easily switch hands and still activate your mag. This one is recessed enough. I don't think you're actually accidentally going to trip it. I never have in the 10 plus years I've owned it. It ejects quite firmly, but you have to press it down a good ways. But, yeah, it's not fully ambi, but for the era, that's okay. The slide throw is smooth, but it is a heavy pull. If you are someone who has some weakness in your hands, this could be difficult for you. It's a stout spring, and it's a very blocky slide. The serration's pretty big, but we don't have front. Now, that might not bother some, might others. Very much a 90s pistol. Honestly, I think the downsides to this gun are self-evident and really don't need much explanation. One more time, because it is oddly, strangely fun and satisfying. But it's definitely a beast. At any rate, just kind of felt like bringing it out. Originally brought it out to shoot it alongside the HK P8A1 that I picked up early in the year. Still really liking that gun. It's absolutely a more practical, useful, even if it's 9, you know. And I brought it out to shoot alongside the M45A1 when we did the 4th of July video. And this time I brought it out again to kind of just get a few more shooting clips, try the Phoenix ammo a little better. So, no surprise. I cannot remember outside of the faux suppressor goofing it up, which is absolutely not the gun's fault. By the way, this doesn't shake loose during recall. I'll give it that. But I cannot remember it ever failing to cycle, nor should it. The only thing I would say is with this heavier spring, if you had particularly light loaded 45, you might run into issues. Maybe. Because it just needs it. That's about it, guys. It's no new news. Just a favorite of mine. Glad I've hung on to it. What do you think? Do you own one? Maybe it's one of the early, cool, all-German ones? I mean, I kind of have to decide how much I want a gun. And if I just stumble into the best, I'll get it. But often price plays a factor. For example, I never went out of my way to get any of the surplus Sig Sauer M17s or those contract overrun Sig Sauer M18s. Now, if I had stumbled into one for a normal price, but I didn't. And with recent events, I'm glad I didn't. Same goes for the Colt M45A1. I could have picked one up, one of the used ones, or I could have just picked up a factory new one that I knew the history of for a little less money. And I did. And I'm okay with that. And especially with this gun, because objectively, it comes with better mags and better finish than the earlier versions. Now, actual military U.S. property marked ones, I'm sure there were a couple in civilian hands, but they're not really out there for any intents and purposes. And as far as I know, HK isn't really making any more of these. But if you know better, let me know, because I'm not an XK expert. I'm not HK expert. But what do you think? Wrap it up. My opinion of this gun is complicated. I do really think it's a fun gun to shoot, and it's iconic. I can pull this out and show it to anyone, and they might not even know what a Mark 23 MK23 is, but they're going to see a giant pistol. I think it actually looks even bigger than it really is because of how squared it is. It's really not that heavy. I mean, it's not Desert Eagle ridiculous, and it is military tough. But I can't say that this is cutting edge and what everyone should carry. Even in the 90s, it was a bit much, but really where it's been surpassed is just modern technology. The USP-45, the HK-45, the HK-45 CT. FN has had a lot of great offerings in 45. This is really showing its age because it was made at a time before modernization had really hit polymers, magazine technology. But again, HK did design this to meet a really crazy high military standard of reliability and durability of parts. So that also explains, part of it. The Bundeswehr's P8, P8A1 are a much more reasonable expression of the USP base system, and probably reason they're still in service today, although they are thinking of replacing them. This, though, well, it hasn't served all that much. By the time it came in and actually was put into hands, its story isn't all that dissimilar to the Colt M45A1 a decade later. In fact, HK would kind of keep making these from the introduction in 96 through about 2010, and then just cancel it. I mean, I guess if someone really wanted more, they could, but everyone's ordering the HK45 or something else. A couple of other militaries did adopt these, Special Forces specifically. No one ever thought about making this a standard issue. But it's a snapshot of early to mid-90s tech, including the, the suppressor. The Knights Armament suppressor was perfectly good by the standards of 1993, 94, but even though they go for crazy money originals today, they're not that good. A lot better suppressors. And of course, the Insight original Lamb electronics have progressed a lot. Still yet, I'm kind of really very glad I didn't sell this, because I don't have many modern 45 guns, and there aren't many modern 45 guns that have seen military service. Mostly you've run into like police Glocks and that kind of thing. But no, I just thought we'd have it out, shoot it a bit, talk it about a bit, share the history. And like I said, I have covered the SIG M17, M18 in recent times. The Colt, of course, I did a big video for Memorial Day on the Beretta M9, M9A1, which is a true personal favorite of mine. But this is another one that was in service. I've thought for years about getting a suppressor for it, but since it has its own unique thread pitch, it would almost have to be a suppressor meant for this gun. But then again, since I don't really own any other suppressor-ready 45s, that's fine. What do you think? Do you own one? If so, which generation? You know, the pros and cons. If you get one of the early production ones, there's good things there, but then you'll have the 10-round mags. If you get a later one like I did after the ban came off, some people don't like them as well. I don't care. For what CD&N charged for these back in the day, I felt like it was a bargain. I was never going to pay the full Monty price that these are going for, 2,000 and up. Forget it. But when these kind of leftover ones came through CD&N for almost half of typical price before, for that, yeah, it's worth it as a novelty. And it is still an effective gun. I mean, if you get into like end of the world situation, no spare parts out there, and you had 45 ammo or reloaded for it, you know, a Mark 23 would have its purpose. And it is an H&K. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you'd like to help support us, check out Patreon. And if you are looking for some good plinking ammo that still groups well for 45, we've had great luck with the Phoenix. I fired about 500 rounds of it so far through various pistols, and it's done very nicely. With that, I'm going to go in and have some dinner. This is Misha. Peanut and I will catch you very soon next time.